The alarm goes off. It's 6 a.m. You don't want to move. But last night, you ate more than you planned, so now you have to. Not because your body is asking for it, not because movement sounds good, but because somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice has already calculated the damage. And this run, this hour at the gym, this burning in your lungs, that's how you pay it back. It feels like discipline. It looks like dedication. But underneath all of it, there's a question worth sitting with. When did moving your body stop feeling like something you do for yourself and start feeling like something you do to yourself? There was a time when humans moved because life required it. They walked to find food, worked the land with their hands, carried water from rivers, built shelters from whatever the earth offered. Movement wasn't a choice to be scheduled. It was simply part of being alive. The body and its effort were the same thing. Nobody counted steps. Nobody tracked calories burned. Nobody felt guilty for resting after a long day of physical work because the rest was earned and the body knew it. So where did the guilt come from? It didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly, across decades, shaped by culture, commerce, and a very particular story about what a human body is supposed to look like. In the early 20th century, the idea of exercise began to shift. It moved away from survival and toward appearance. Fitness started being sold, not as health, but as a solution to a problem. And the problem, according to the magazines, the advertisements, the public messaging of that era, was your body itself. Too soft, too heavy, too undisciplined. The language of fitness became the language of fixing. By the 1980s, this message had grown into something much louder. Aerobics classes filled with high energy and higher expectations. Diet culture expanded into a multi-billion-dollar industry, one built entirely on the idea that you were not quite enough as you were. Exercise became tied to eating. More food meant more exercise. Rest meant failure. Sweat meant redemption. And here's something worth knowing. Researchers who study body image have found that exposure to fitness advertising, even brief exposure, can increase feelings of body dissatisfaction within minutes. The images didn't need to say anything cruel directly. They simply showed an ideal and let the gap between that ideal and the mirror do the rest. For many people, this gap became the engine of their entire relationship with movement. A woman in her late 20s once described her gym routine this way. She didn't go because she felt strong. She went because she felt wrong. Every session was a negotiation, a way of managing the anxiety that came from simply existing in a body that didn't match what she saw online. The movement itself brought her no joy. It brought her temporary relief, and the difference between joy and relief is enormous. This is where the punishment mindset was born, not in cruelty, not in stupidity, but in a culture that learned to treat the human body as a problem to be managed rather than a life to be lived. Exercise was handed a role it was never meant to carry, the role of moral correction. The body became something to be disciplined into acceptability, and once that idea took root, once movement became linked to worthiness, to earning rest, to paying back the cost of pleasure, it became very difficult to separate the two again. We didn't choose this story, but we inherited it. And most of us began living it without ever noticing it had started. Inherited ideas don't stay abstract for long. They find systems, they find structure, and over time, they become so embedded in daily life that they stop feeling like ideas at all. They just feel like reality. The punishment mindset didn't simply live inside people's heads. It found tools, and those tools made it precise. The first tool was the number. Calories in, calories out. The equation sounds logical, almost scientific, and in certain medical contexts, it has its place. But when it moved into everyday life, something shifted. The number stopped being information and became judgment. Eating 400 calories meant owing 400 calories. A rest day meant a debt unpaid. The body was no longer a living system with needs and rhythms. It became a ledger, and the ledger had to balance. Fitness tracking accelerated this completely. When wearable devices became widely available in the 2010s, millions of people suddenly had real-time access to data about their own bodies. Steps taken, heart rate, calories burned, hours slept. In theory, this was empowering. In practice, for many people, it created a new layer of anxiety. Studies have shown that for individuals already prone to disordered thinking about food and exercise, fitness trackers can intensify obsessive behavior rather than reduce it. The device doesn't know why you're moving. It only knows whether you did. And social media added an audience. Workout posts became a language of their own. The early morning run photographed against golden light, the gym selfie with the caption about discipline and results. The before and after image, always framed as a story of transformation and triumph. None of this was malicious, but all of it reinforced the same quiet message. Movement is performance. The body is a project, and progress is something you show. A man in his early 30s described checking his fitness app before getting out of bed each morning, not to plan his day, but to feel behind or ahead before the day had even started. On days when the numbers looked good, he felt calm. On days when they didn't, a low-level tension followed him until he'd compensated. He didn't call it punishment. He called it staying on track. But the feeling underneath was the same. This is how a mindset becomes a system. It attaches itself to habits, to technology, to social approval. It gives you metrics so you always know exactly how far you are from acceptable. It creates a loop, movement triggered by guilt, temporarily relieving guilt, then resetting back to a baseline of not quite enough. And because the loop produces short-term relief, the brain learns to trust it. The system feels like self-control. It feels like responsibility. But a system built on self-rejection cannot lead to self-care. It can only lead to more rejection, more correction, more effort spent trying to fix something that was never truly broken. The numbers keep moving, the bar keeps shifting, and the body, the actual living, breathing body, keeps being asked to prove itself worthy of rest it already deserves. At some point, the body stops cooperating. It doesn't announce this loudly. It doesn't send a clear warning. It simply begins to quietly resist, through exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, through injuries that appear without obvious cause, through a growing heaviness that settles not just in the muscles but somewhere deeper. The body, it turns out, is paying close attention to the energy behind the movement, and it knows the difference between being cared for and being punished. This is the cost that never appears on the fitness tracker. When exercise is driven by shame, the stress response activates differently. The body reads the emotional context of effort, movement performed from a place of self-rejection. The desperate run, the punishing gym session, the workout that begins with "I have to" rather than "I want to," triggers cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, in ways that gentle or joyful movement does not. Over time, chronically elevated cortisol doesn't strengthen the body, it wears it down. The very effort meant to fix the body begins to work quietly against it. But the physical cost, as real as it is, may not be the deepest one. The deeper cost is what happens to the relationship between a person and their own body. When movement is consistently used as punishment, the body stops feeling like home. It starts feeling like a problem to be managed, a source of constant disappointment, something that always needs more work before it earns gentleness. Rest becomes uncomfortable. Stillness brings guilt and pleasure. Simple, uncomplicated physical pleasure, the kind that comes from moving freely without agenda, becomes almost impossible to access. A woman in her mid-30s once described reaching a point where she couldn't walk through a park without calculating whether it counted, whether it was enough, whether she could log it somewhere and let it mean something. The movement was happening, but the experience of it had completely disappeared. Her body was present. She was not. This is what punishment does over time. It doesn't just exhaust the body, it disconnects a person from it entirely. And the painful irony is this. People who exercise from punishment are often trying, underneath all of it, to feel better, to feel worthy, to feel at peace with themselves. The intention is not self-destruction. It is self-improvement, but the method carries the opposite message. Every punishing workout whispers the same thing, the original. Shame whispered, "You are not enough as you are." The movement confirms the wound rather than healing it. No amount of miles run from that place will ever feel like arrival, because the destination keeps moving, because the goal was never really fitness. It was self-acceptance, and self-acceptance cannot be earned through self-punishment. That particular road does not lead where it promises. The body has been trying to say this for a long time. Most of us just weren't taught how to listen. Something is shifting. It's happening quietly, without a single dramatic moment, the way most real changes happen. Across gyms and wellness spaces and online communities and physical therapy offices, a different conversation about movement has begun. Not louder than the old one yet, but steadier and growing. More people are starting to ask a question that wasn't commonly asked before. How does this feel? Not just physically, but emotionally. Not how many calories did I burn, but did I actually want to be here? Not did I push hard enough, but did I respect what my body was telling me today? This shift has a name in some circles: intuitive movement. The idea is simple, though practicing it takes time. But the body's genuine signals guide the choice of movement, rather than guilt, obligation, or external metrics. Some days that means a long run. Some days it means a slow walk. Some days it means stillness, and trusting that stillness is not failure. Research has begun to support what many people are discovering through personal experience. Studies comparing guilt-driven exercise with autonomy-based exercise, movement chosen freely for internal reasons rather than external pressure, consistently find that people who move from genuine choice sustain their habits longer, experience more positive emotions during activity, and report a healthier overall relationship with their bodies. Punishment-based motivation produces short bursts of compliance followed by burnout. Care-based motivation builds something that actually lasts. The fitness industry itself is slowly responding. Yoga studios now openly advertise rest as part of the practice. Running communities talk about easy effort days without apology. Strength training culture has begun embracing the idea that recovery is not laziness. It is where the actual growth happens. The body doesn't get stronger during the workout. It gets stronger during the rest that follows. This has always been physiologically true, but it is only recently becoming culturally acceptable to say out loud. A man in his 40s described the moment his relationship with exercise changed. He had been a dedicated runner for years, disciplined, consistent, and quietly miserable about it. One afternoon, after a long period of injury and forced rest, he went outside simply because he wanted some air. No distance planned, no pace tracked, no purpose beyond the walk itself. Halfway down the street, he noticed something he hadn't felt in years. His body felt good. Not accomplished. Not redeemed. Just good. Alive in a simple, uncomplicated way. He stood there for a moment, a little surprised. Then he kept walking. That small moment didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. This is how the new relationship begins. Not with a dramatic overhaul, not with a perfect program, but with one honest moment of moving because the body genuinely wanted to rather than because the mind demanded it. It feels unfamiliar at first, smaller than expected, almost too quiet to trust. But that quietness is not emptiness. It is the feeling of something no punishment ever produced. A body that is being listened to, rather than overruled. There is an old idea found in many cultures across many centuries that the body and the self are separate things. The body is physical, temporary, imperfect. The self, the mind, the spirit, whatever we call it, is somehow above it. More important, more real. And the body must be controlled, disciplined, shaped into something worthy of the self that lives inside it. This idea runs very deep, deeper than fitness culture, deeper than social media. It is woven into the way many of us were raised, into the language we use without thinking. My body, as though we are one thing and it is another, something we own, something we manage, something we are constantly either satisfied or disappointed with. But what if that separation was always the problem? What if the body is not a vehicle you drive, not a project you manage, not a debt you repay, but simply, completely you? Not a lesser version of you that needs to be corrected, not evidence of your discipline or your failure. Just you, breathing, moving, resting, alive. When movement comes from that place, from genuine belonging rather than distance, from care rather than correction, it changes texture entirely. A walk becomes less about destination and more about presence. Stretching in the morning becomes less about burning and more about returning. Returning to the body after hours of sleep, saying something like, "I'm here and I'm paying attention." Effort, when it comes, feels different too. Not like punishment, more like conversation. This doesn't mean movement stops being challenging. It doesn't mean every workout becomes effortless or joyful. The body still gets tired, muscles still ache, Some days are harder than others, and some days the most honest thing is simply to rest. But the difference is in the intention underneath the effort. Challenge chosen from respect feels completely different from suffering imposed from shame. The body knows which one it's receiving. Gratitude is perhaps the quietest form of this shift. Not gratitude performed, not a forced positive thought before a workout you secretly resent, but a genuine, occasional recognition of what the body actually does. It breathes without being asked. It heals from injury without instruction. It carries you through every day, through grief and joy and exhaustion and wonder, without ever demanding acknowledgement. The body has been faithful in ways the mind rarely notices. To stop punishing the body with exercise is not to stop moving. It is to stop moving from a place of war. It is to put down the belief that the body is your enemy, your embarrassment, your unfinished work, and to try even imperfectly, even slowly, to treat it as something that deserves the same gentleness you would offer someone you love. This is not a destination you arrive at cleanly. It is a direction you keep choosing. Some days more easily than others, some days barely at all. But every small moment of honest, uncharged movement is a step away from punishment and toward something the body has been waiting a long time to feel. Acceptance without conditions. Until next time, my friends. Sleep well and stay curious.